Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I'm reviewing Age of Inventors. Age of Inventors is a 1 to 4 player competitive game of resource optimization. This is a Kickstarter, I'll have a link to that down below, and this over here is a prototype, all rules, components, all that stuff, completely subject to change and all of that. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into this one. Age of Inventors is a resource optimization game, like I said already. The goal of the game is across 4 rounds to basically resource optimize better than the other players, such that you are moving up on these 3 tracks over here, where ultimately being at the top of those tracks will give you the majority of the points you're going to earn in this game. You're going to be trying to move up those tracks by placing inventions and inventors down on the board in order to be on top of your resources, in order to get those bonuses on those tracks. A few other ways you'll get points across the course of the game, but you're trying to basically, well, convert resources better and more efficiently than other players across 4 rounds. The round sequence in this game is going to be every single round. The first round you skip a lot of steps. There's a whole, let's say this whole player aid card over here I can show you, where you're going to be skipping a lot of steps over here on this upkeep phase. You're going to be skipping the first few on the first round. But you go straight to draft equipment, number 6 over there. You're going to draft equipment, which involves players paying for the equipment tiles up here. These equipment tiles, players are going to go ahead and in ingenuity order, they're going to place a bid, not really a bid, they're going to choose a tile to buy, giving up their funds from their own board. You're going to be tracking your funds on your own little gear wheel over here. You'll be tracking those funds, paying those costs as necessary to grab the tile that you want, going ahead, putting your mark over there, grabbing the tile and putting it into your board, into your own little player board over here, where you can then do the ability on one of these spots. I can go ahead and place it over here, where I'll get 1 gear over there and 4 more funds back. So I'll go ahead and adjust those as needed. I'll get the gear, I'll grab the token, and I'll have a piece of lab equipment. All the players are going to do so over there. All the players are going to draft a piece of lab equipment, and then when that's done, you're going to go to step 7 on this card, which is running your lab equipment. You're going to go ahead and run the actual lab equipment, getting the little resources you're going to try to gather over there. And of course, in round 1, you're running 1 piece. In round 2, 2, and then 3 and 4. So in the 4th round, you'll be running a bunch of pieces of lab equipment to get either resource conversion or various funds or various resources, or in order to use those towards your resource engine as you play through the game. When you're done with that, you're going to go into the player phase, where in the player phase, you're going to start taking a bunch of actions, and this is where this is a bit of a worker placement and action selection game. You see, you're going to have 4 workers you can place out, 4 lab assistants that can go on certain spots on the board. You're also going to have 4 switches. So if we show you our board over here, if we show you the board, you're going to have specific workers that are going to be on your board you can utilize towards different areas you can go to. You can place a worker to place on a lab equipment to get that benefit over there. You can also place your workers on the various spots up here, as well as down here for different perks. Up here is going to allow you to get one of these tiles, paying the cost shown. These tiles have high obligations on them, but if you get those obligations, if you give up those resources at the end of the game, if you have those as extra, you're going to get extra victory points, which is one of the bigger sources of extra victory points outside these tracks. You can go on the ingenuity track, paying a certain amount of ideas to move up one above other players, which will give you more victory points at the end of the give you more victory points at the end of the game, and will also cost you ideas and give you funds during the income phase. You can also go down over here in order to go ahead and clear the inventors or the invention tracks, and then possibly buy one. And then lastly, as the game goes on, you're going to have inventors on the board with their own little worker placement zones on them, and when that happens, you can go ahead and place your person on that inventor in order to do their optimization engine, giving the resources on the left to the player who owns that inventor, whose inventor that is, and then getting the resources on the right. And so you have these 4 workers, and you can place them out on these various locations on the board. So again, in a game turn, you're either placing an inventor or activating a switch. We haven't explained switches yet, but when you place an inventor, you're placing it down a spot in order to get the benefit of that spot. You'll have 4 workers, 4 lab assistants per round. You also have the options for switches. Now, switches are going to be on your player board. They're going to start on the left position, but you can go ahead and turn switches on in order to activate the ability of the switch, which is generally either gathering an invention, gathering an inventor, or placing an invention, or placing an inventor. To do that, when you gather an invention, you pay the idea cost, either 1, 2, or 3, take the requisite invention, paying that idea cost, and you now have it in your hand, moving the other ideas up, and putting a new one in play. Similarly, for an inventor, you can rotate a switch to take one of the inventors, paying the fund cost, 6, 4, or 2, and then go ahead and take that, slide the rest down, put it down, and you now have that inventor in your hand. But having them in your hand is not enough. You have to get them out, and for that, you have to again play a switch. So effectively, an inventor and an invention both effectively require 2 switches to get in play in the game, although you do start with some inventors and inventions when the game begins, and there's many things throughout the game that will give you the opportunity to reset switch, to gather more inventors, gather more inventions. When you place them down, inventors and inventions have different rules. An inventor has to be placed on any free spot on the board, starting off around over here, but can never be touching another inventor. So that when you have that inventor over there, If you have another inventor, the other inventor cannot be touching this inventor. It can be touching another invention, or it could be touching somewhere else around the central hex. So once you have an invention in play, which has to match the color of the inventor, you can now put that inventor somewhere else on the board. Now, speaking of matching the color of the inventor, like I said already, you have to match the color of the inventor, which means this invention over here could not go over here because it would not be matching that inventor. It has to have at least one side somewhere, so that, for instance, if this was a setup, you can place this invention down over here, or over here, anywhere where there's a green hex where you can match it up. So you're trying to be mindful of the colors of the inventions, place them down, as well as the inventors, and different things happen when you place them down. When you place down an inventor, you're going to look at the cost shown in the inventor over here. You're going to look at the cost. So for example, you're going to pay that gear cost, and if an inventor has two different costs, then you're going to take a look at either one, paying either one of those costs, and then you're going to go ahead and get the ideas on the right. You're going to plant a book down on it of your color, and now it's a worker placement spot where other players can go. That's how inventors work. You're also going to get their specific cards. So if you have a specific card over here, when you'll get their card, which shows you how many ideas you get when you build them, it shows you the resource conversion, and it gives you an ability as well. Sometimes an activated ability, sometimes an ongoing ability. Inventions, on the other hand, have a slightly different way they operate. When an invention goes in play, you pay the cost over there, and it's worth noting that when an invention shows two costs, you have to pay both of them, not either or. And you place down an invention, you pay the cost on the left, you get to advance on the tracks on the right. So for example, this invention over here advances you 1 on this track, where you may get bonuses as you move up the track, and this invention over here moves you up 3 on this track, which again, as you pass things, you'll get bonuses as well. And then you also get the benefits on the bottom. And in the case of insulin, you get 4 resources of any kind. In the case of the sewing machine, you get a gear resource for one for being on the track at all, and an additional 1 for every person below you. There's a whole little play rate, shows you all the symbols, show you how they operate, but generally being higher on the ingenuity track will give you a lot of perks in the game, a lot of opportunities to stay ahead in different ways. And so that's basically what's going on. You're going to be flipping switches, using lab assistants, placing them all down. There's a few free actions you can take. So for example, you can go ahead and rotate an inventor when you have one in order to utilize their ability. But you're basically trying to use the combination of worker placement and action selection to place things down so that you can move up the tracks. You're trying to make sure to stay on top of your resource conversion, because you'll need ideas. You'll need ideas throughout the game to move up the ingenuity track. You'll need ideas to buy inventions. You also need funds. You'll need funds to buy more inventors. You're going to need the balance of going back and forth, placing down inventors and inventions to get your ideas back into play, to set up such that you can put down the right inventions next to the right inventors, and so you can go ahead and slowly move up those tracks, because at the end of the game, you're going to get points for a few things. You're going to get points for any of these you have, any of these tiles you've accomplished, and again, they are hard. They require both an upfront cost, and you have to have a bunch of resources as well, but they'll be worth generally between 1 and 2 points. You'll get points for how high you are in the ingenuity track, 3, 2, or 1 points respectively, and you'll get points for each of these tracks being 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. This way you'll get the bulk of the points in the game, because you get 8 points for being at the top of the track, 4, then 2, then 1 for 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place. And then finally, you're going to have a bag of tokens where occasionally certain things like different leaders or some inventions will let you pull into the bag, pulling out tokens, and those tokens generally are between, I think there's like mostly 1s, a few 2s, and maybe a 3 in there, but that's going to give you another potential option for extra bonus points as you go through it. And that is Age of Inventors. Across 4 rounds of play, last thing, I forgot one thing, every round after the first, you're going to have an event card. You're going to have a time to play card where you're going to go ahead and read the board game times. Either the location action, this location action is free, or when your inventor enables an invention to be placed adjacent to them, you gain an idea. So that's a fun thing. These are going to give you different events with a little bit of flavor text and a choice that players vote for, yes or nay, or which, not really yay or nay so much as which option they want to go for. But this gives you a little bit of in-game agency as players vote on different rules that will affect every round after the first. And that's basically Age of Inventors. 4 rounds of play, trying to build up your engine, trying to convert resources as efficiently as possible, building up your lab equipment, placing inventors out on play to generate ideas, using those ideas to buy inventions, placing those inventions down to earn advancements on the track, and basically trying to come up with the most efficient resource engine between the tiles you place, how they work into your engine, how they work with the unique corporation's abilities, as you try to become the most efficient or higher scoring player across 4 rounds of play. Which brings us to the review part of this video. We're starting off with the ease of play. A rulebook for this, even though it's a prototype rulebook, fairly easy to go through. A few small things that are very prototype, misspellings, a few questions in the rulebook, some things with tiebreakers, small stuff like that. But for the most part, this is a very easy game to get into, even in the prototype stage. Rulebook is very clear, very concise. It just covers the actions you're going to be going through in the game. Overall, a fairly accessible game. A game plays roughly 90 minutes. It's going to range based on player count and whether you're learning for the first time. I think you can probably get it down to 60 if you're playing with with people who are not being too AP prone, and it can probably run up to 2 hours if you're playing a full four-player gameplay with players who are taking their time. As far as what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking, to start off with, the game has, well, it has a good game length to begin with in terms of the amount of game you get out of this for the time frame in a very tight resource engine. This game can be brutal. There are times where if you don't plan accordingly, your resources will go out the window and you'll have to figure out how to get them back because you didn't plan around the fact that you needed that blue resource, but you don't have a way to get it right now, and that means your entire turn for the next 3-4 actions falls apart. You might want to give players a starting first round, but I also like the tightness of that because of the fact that this game really is a tight resource engine. It's a tight resource engine that you need to try to figure out how to get what you need, how to use it to drive yourself forward. There's a lot of crunchy resource optimization going on as you try to figure out which inventions work for you, when it's the right move to go ahead and pay those extra funds to clear the track, when you want to pay a little bit more for the right lab invention that will work into your engine, trying to combine that with your starting corporation's abilities and how to take advantage of that most efficiently. Moving up the ingenuity track will cost you worker placement actions and ideas, but doing so can pay off strongly both in the beginning phase where you're trying to choose which lab equipment you want, as well as when you're trying to get that first action every round, because there are almost always going to be inventions and inventors that work better for any game situation, and having first access to those can be a big deal. Additionally, as you move up these tracks over here, one thing we didn't talk about is you can also earn these. Every single round, whoever's highest in those tracks earns these tokens and gets to use that type of resource as a wild resources when building things, which is huge. If you have better access to the yellows or to not the yellows, if you have better access to the oranges or greens and you move up those tracks respectively and you manage to use those as wild to compensate for the lack of blue resources you have. By the way, these are all science resources, they all have names. I just think of them as orange, blue, and green, but that gives you an additional edge in the game. There's a lot of moves in this game that are the I want that move first, which makes the ingenuity track so important. I like the fact that there's a constant fight in my mind as to what's the best thing to do. Do I go ahead and take that starting invention that is really helpful right now and could really work for me, or do I lock in the ingenuity track because the ideas get more expensive as you go? I mean, the first player to go there pays only 2 ideas, then 4, then 6, then 8, and ideas are not so common that you cannot afford to take that lightly. And so locking in first place might give you the first place for the next 2 rounds or 3 actions, but you might lose that invention that you really want or that inventor that you really want. It all works really well as far as giving you reasons to care about inventions, inventors, where they're going to affect your track, how they're going to affect your engine. It is a solid resource conversion game. As far as what I don't like in the game, the end game scoring is very anticlimactic. Like, very anticlimactic. You go through, 60 to 90 minutes of a lot of tight resource conversion. You get to the end game and you're like, and it feels like only a few things really matter. At the end of the day, the biggest source of points in the game are going to be these tracks up here. You're going to get the most points from these tracks. Sure, a few from first place over here, a few from these tiles, a few from the bag, but for the most part, you want to heavily focus on those tracks. To the point, by the way, these tiles are incredibly anticlimactic because they require like 5 resources just to get in them. They require 3 basic resources, 1 idea, and 2 funds just to buy a tile, and then even after that, that's another 4 green resources to get a point. The resource payoff of these tiles feels so weak that it basically feels like the thing you do when everything else you've tried to achieve you've basically gotten, so I guess let's go ahead and go here because it's the only thing I can really do with my extra resources and time. The payoff on these does not feel worthwhile, and it feels fairly anticlimactic. The few points you get for ingenuity and the tokens to the bag, that mostly comes down to those tracks. It mostly comes down to those 3 tracks, which, while not a bad thing, it kind of feels like you just spent a lot of time building a whole lot of stuff up, and it feels like the endgame scoring is fairly anticlimactic in there. Additionally, I kind of wish the board mattered more. This board over here, the game ends either at the end of 4 rounds or when the board is completely full, but I wish the board mattered more. For the most part, you're placing down your token tiles on the board. Inventors have to be not next to other inventors. Inventions have to be next to certain inventors. At a certain point, when you surround an inventor, they're going to retire and they'll still be in play, but you'll move their token. There's a bunch of things going on over here that occasionally have an impact on what you're doing or how you're doing it, but it kind of, for the most part, it feels like you have a large board that minimally matters. It does matter. There are times where it matters. There are times where you're like, I need someone else to place an inventor down so I can place my invention down, or vice versa. But for the most part, it didn't feel like it mattered a lot. It felt like you had a large board here, and it could have been your own personal player board or something different. I wish the board had a bit more impact or gravitas to the experience. I almost wish other tiles referenced adjacencies or the types of other tiles so that I felt positioning and placement mattered more. I think there's more they can do with this board, and I want to see more. I want to see tiles that matter about other positioning. If this invention is next to 3 other blue inventions, you get this and another thingy, or you get extra resources based on the placement. For right now, the board just didn't feel like it mattered enough. It felt like there was just enough rules to justify it, and that's about it. As far as I can see others not liking, To begin with, it's a very dry game. This is absolutely a very dry game. This is very much resource conversion. That's it. Sure, there's flavor text and there's inventors and all these other things, but it's basically a resource optimization game with a few events sprinkled in. And speaking of the events, you may not like the voting on the events. If you're playing a 3-player game, you're going to have players voting against you if you're in the lead, and you may just not like the fact that players are trying to vote for the thing that helps them more and hurts you. It's a totally fine mechanic. It may bother you. And additionally, similarly, drawing into this bag and trying to grab a tile, the difference between 1 and 2 points with a game where the point scoring is like 18 to 20 points, if that high. It's probably 15 to 20 points as far as the point scoring for this game. And so drawing in a 2 or 3 point tile from this bag can be absolutely huge as far as an extra degree of luck. Same with those tiles, by the way. Even though these tiles are hard to get, the worst part about them is sometimes you pay for them and you still can't get them. And sometimes you grab the 2 point tiles and it's a better fit for what you're doing. I remember the last game we played, I ended with a ton of extra resources. I ended with a ton of extra green resources, and I couldn't do anything with them. I couldn't apply them to anything. I kept trying to draw tiles, and if you got lucky, sure, that'd be an extra 3 points possibly. If you don't get lucky, you just have a ton of extra green resources and nothing much you can do with them. As far as final thoughts on Age of Inventors surprised me to a degree. Surprised me only because I had no expectations for this game. I'd never heard of this game, I'd never seen this game, they sent me the game to cover the game, and I didn't know what to expect walking into it. But it gives you a solid resource conversion engine. There's a decent game going on here as far as giving you a lot of things as far as trying to optimize around the game state, trying to optimize around other players, trying to figure out the best way to build out your lab equipment, your inventors, your inventions, to place them down, to get your engines a move up the tracks you want. You're going to want to focus more heavily on like 1 or 2 tracks, probably 2 tracks. If you go for all 3, you'll get a whole bunch of 2nd and 3rd place points, which will not be enough. Getting to the top of the track sooner than other players, getting to the end over there, you can really get a lot of points in those tracks, and that's the prime motivator of everything you should be doing in this game. Everything else should be secondary to those things. Overall, it does give you a decent puzzle with a corporation variability, invention variability, the inventor variability, enough decent variability as far as the general nuances of what types of abilities and things in play. While the overall gameplay is not that variable, there's just different things going on over there. For the most part, I think there's a few small things I want to see tweaked about the game. The board space, the endgame scoring, I kind of wish there was more going on, more endgame scoring. I like the core concept of what they have happening here a lot. I want to see a bit more stuff done as far as ways to, I don't know, the endgame scoring to me and the board thing I think are the biggest things. If those two were cleaned up more, I would really love this game. As it is, I thoroughly enjoy it and can recommend this one easily enough. This one's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. As far as other game recommendations, first of all, Furnace. If you're looking for a tight resource conversion game that plays an even shorter time frame than this one, Furnace from Arcane Wonders is a great resource game that plays in roughly 45 minutes or so. And if you're looking to take your resource conversion to the next step, then Agricola from Uwe Rosenberg and Z-Man Games, Agricola is always a solid choice as far as taking that degree of worker placement and action selection to the next level in an even more invested resource conversion game. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I hope you have a good one.